Everybody, welcome to the webinar today. So today in our webinar, we'll talk about the Cask and the Spink auctions. And my name is Monica Cui. I work for Cask. This is Mark, my colleague. And also we would be very honest to invite our guest, which is Daniel Lam, located in Hong Kong, will join the webinar. So the first section, we'll talk about the bottles we bid on the auctions. And then Mark will explain because we have a lot of amazing casks on the auction too. Mark was loving to explain you the details of the auction. So now I leave the time to Daniel.
Hi everyone, sorry again. My name is Daniel Lam. I joined the auction business for about 13 years. And through this year, I was among the first one in Asia to start the whiskey auction in 2009 and also the cognac auction in 2010. Well, some good records, some world records been achieved, and I've come across and see the growth of the whiskey auction in Asia and actually in the world. And of course, I mean, initially we do a lot of whiskey bottle auction, but recently we're seeing the trend that more cars been involved. Something I would like to share with you is for coming auction highlight. And before that, I just want to show you some of the figures and statistics to everyone that how the whiskey auction trends been changed for the past decade. Just one moment, please. So as you can see, I mean, based on my calculation, you will see that when I first started in 2009, I mean, the value, the number of bottle, what I did for average in a year for whiskey auction, number of bottle in 2009, which is less than like 100 bottle, 150 bottle. And you will see the gradual grow and boom, and then 2005 we have 2,000 bottle, and steadily we're keeping every year 2,000 bottle. But it doesn't mean that we didn't increase in terms of the amount. But if you look at the next one, you can see the value. In 2009 we make less than, allow me to interpret in the Hong Kong dollar currency, we're doing less than $1 million Hong Kong dollar. And in 2015 we see the first growth of the whiskey boom, especially on the Japanese whiskey side, and then we achieved 40 million Hong Kong. And in 2018, probably you will hear about the 1926 Macallan. Of course, now the world record is about 13 million Hong Kong dollar. But in 2018, I've come across two bottles, 1926 Macallan, which is Peter Blake, and also the Adami, which both sold for about 7 and 8 million Hong Kong. And that's why I can see the value for 2018, the total hammer price over 100 million, which is almost 10 times back in 2009. And the hammer price per bottle in 2009, which is less than 4,000. And then you will see the gradual trend and the growth for the bottle price, per bottle price was up to 2018, which is like $50,000 Hong Kong per bottle. So it's quite a significant growth, and also of course we see some decline on the 2017, 2019 and 20, which is because of the COVID. But actually during the COVID in 2020 and 2021, I mean, most of the auction have make a very stable and strong percentage growth for the whiskey, other luxury product like watches and contemporary art, all this kind of thing. All right, back to the screen. Yep. Well, which come the first pair of the Hanyu Ichiro Joker pair, these two. Well, let me make a brief introduction about this pair. I mean, the Hanyu Ichiro card series is quite legendary. When I first started selling in 2009, each of these cards would cost about 3,000 Hong Kong dollar, which means about $400 US roughly. And it has 58 cards. Yes, a complete set. It was released by the Hanyu Distillery, which is already closed down in 2004 and dismantled. And the remaining cards was bought by nowadays the Chichibu owner, Mr. Ichiro Akuto, the grandson of Hanyu. And he's a very smart in the marketing guy. He used to work for Suntory. And in 2006, he's bought back these 300 odd casks, and he started to release these cars based on the playing card game series. From 2006 to 2012, these all 58 cards were released. And then in 2015, when I first saw the sets of the Hanyu card series, it was fetched for about 3.8 million Hong Kong, which is about $500,000 US. And then ongoingly, the card prices appreciate. And in 2012 and 2020 and 2021, I did offer this similar set in the auction, and the price for the latest one was about 12 million Hong Kong dollar, which is about 1.8 million US. And for this set, it's very unique because come from these two Hanyu cards. Well, the color joker was released, the color joker and the mono joker were both released in 2012. But if you look at the quantity, the number of items, the color joker is about 3,000 bottles, and the mono joker is only 200 odd bottles. So it's pretty rare. And in the heyday, I think when it was released in 2012, 2013, people can still get it for like 10,000 US, 15,000 US a bottle now. And the recent record for this bottle, for this mono joker, the average price about 80,000 US to about $500,000 Hong Kong dollars, something like that. So for upcoming auction, we have a set of this pair, which is we estimated at $500,000 Hong Kong dollar, which is about 70,000 US dollar. And of course, you can see some of the card sample. When later we're gonna let Mark to introduce it to you. We have 6 cards to be offered this time. And the other one what I'd like to bring up to your attention, this is the Macallan, 1951 Macallan. A very early release Macallan. If you hear about the Fine and Rare series, was released in 2002, and this is the Macallan which is released earlier than the Fine and Rare series. And 300 odd bottles something is both sherry casks rested. 632 bottles, excuse me for that. Yeah. This is one of the highlights for the Macallan, of course. And then we do have a Port Ellen. This is special release in Asia, only for Taiwan market, Port Ellen. 1981, which is single cask Port Ellen, 33 years old. And it's only limited to 2015 bottle. Well, last but not least, and of course, this is a bourbon. Whiskey Geek or Whiskey fan, I'm sure they've been aware that the recent bourbon rush, the price, the value for bourbon has increased significantly. And this bottle is actually only 10 years old, but it was distilled in 1957 and bottled in 1967 by Old Fitzgerald. Very rare, mostly for European market. Well, there's many special bottling in upcoming 18th of August Spink and Cask CXT auction, where people can visit our website and downloading it. And I will leave to Mark, and then later we just go through some of the questions. All right.
Superb. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, so my name is Mark. I'm a senior sales manager here at Cask 88. really nice opportunity to talk about casks, probably for many of you that are avid bottle collectors. Perhaps cask ownership is something that you've maybe dreamed of in the past, but not considered, or perhaps not even thought possible. For me, you know, as someone who's enjoyed whiskey for many, many years and worked around the industry and collected bottles, although I have to say I collected them very unsuccessfully because I usually end up drinking them. For me, the pinnacle of whiskey, of any whiskey collection, is to own your own cask, have it silently, quietly resting and maturing in a warehouse in Scotland, ready to do with as you please at the moment you choose, whether that's to bottle it up and enjoy it with friends as your very own bespoke bottling, or whether you choose to sell it on and enjoy any value gains. You know, very much like bottles, the cask market is the same. It's very buoyant, it's very lively and very stable as well. So there's always lots of options. Here at Cask 88 as well, we are independent bottlers. We do many of our own independent bottlings. We have our own in-house design team, so we can help, you know, bring your dream of a bespoke bottling to life from the very beginning to sitting and enjoying it in a glass with friends. The casks that we have here are really fantastic and slightly eclectic range. And I'm very excited to give you a very brief introduction to each of them.
Before any who we want to purchase about cask, just remember that all the cask is available for manager ownership. Just you have the broker or you have a duty representative, and every year you need to pay like 55 pounds per annum for the insurance and management fee. So the first cask would be on auction. When you see the typical Tiffany blue, it's from Bruichladdich Distillery.
Yeah, so Bruichladdich is a fantastic proposition for cask ownership. The distillery has probably been one of the most celebrated and successful the last 20 years. The distillery had a heritage that sadly fell silent in the 1980s and wasn't renewed until the early 2000s. Two key whiskey legends that helped bring this brand back. That was Mark Renier, formerly of Springbank Distillery, and the ever-famous Jim McEwan, formerly of Bowmore. Jim McEwan in particular has always had a flair for cask experimentation and really pushing the envelope of what can be done with whiskey maturation. And that was something that really went on to characterize Bruichladdich, both in the liquid and the brand identity. Sadly, Bruichladdich, as with many distilleries, it was a victim of its success in some ways, you could say. The distillery got the notice of the very big French spirits producer Remy Cointreau in 2012. They purchased the distillery, which has been a very positive move. It's obviously given more weight to the brand and given it new markets. But unfortunately, one of the first things they did was to cease all independent cask sales from the distillery. So Bruichladdich is now part of a very special and very finite sect of cask ownership. Over the last 10 years, absolutely zero casks have been released from the distillery for sale. And anything that's out there extremely rare, and as casks are bought by owners, bottled and enjoyed, there's less and less of them every single year. So this is a really fantastic opportunity to get hold of Bruichladdich, especially at this age. This one is from 2002, so it is currently 19 years old. Bruichladdich as well is atypical for Islay. It's one that takes age and maturation very well. It's not a classically heavily peated style as you would expect from its neighbors like Laphroaig and Lagavulin. It's much more, you know, mainland style. It's sweet, it's rich, it's incredibly rounded, and it has a lovely chewy, waxy, fudgy quality to it that really becomes apparent once it's over 15 years old. So at 19, this is a fantastic candidate to enjoy immediately, or even to hang on for a number of years and age it further. It has a really nice high ABV retention of 52.4%. So it is very well set to be aged for a good number of years. It's a fantastic candidate to take it up to 30 years and above. And that would be a really fantastic and rare opportunity to have a Bruichladdich of that age.
I think we have the sample of the Bruichladdich in Hong Kong. Daniel, do we have it?
Yes, we do. We have a sufficient sample for those who are interested to have a taste in Hong Kong or in Asia. we can ship a small portion to them.
That's perfect.
Superb.
So we go for another island cask, which is Deutsche, one of my favorite cask. The Bunnahabhain normally just don't produce like peated, non-peated spirits until 2013. Release a brand called Deutsche. It's heavily peaty. I really love it. So a lot of independent bottlers have this. Even for the young spirit, it's quite nice and performance, and as I taste. So I leave this to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Monica said, Stoische is a very interesting new development. It comes from the Bunnahabhain distillery, which is a very well long-standing respected distillery from Islay from the 1880s. And it's one of the smaller brands, one that we don't see as much being from a smaller producer. So it is one that stands out. Bunnahabhain used to be very much a classic Islay. It was a very heavily peated flavor profile. Up until around about the late 1980s, early 1990s, the distillery, because it's quite often used in the Scottish Leader and black bottle blends, they decided to produce a much more lightly peated style that was more apt for blending. It wasn't until the early 2000s that the distillery would experiment again with a heavily peated barley. This would eventually come out as bottlings that will no doubt be familiar to some of you from about 10 years ago. That's the Struidar and the Moyne. But the distillery was a little bit concerned that, you know, if people were to try those bottlings and it was the first time they tried Bunnahabhain, it might be a little bit misleading as to what the flavor profile was. So in 2013, they took the decision to produce a brand new spirit, using the same distilling equipment at Bunnahabhain, but using a very heavily peated barley, a heavily peated flavor profile. And that is the cask that we have here today, the Stoische. Stoische retains some of the lighter characteristics of its bigger brother. It's got a lovely, smooth, malty character to it. But towards the end of the palate, it picks up a fantastic, rich peppercorn, heavily peated character, very reminiscent of something like a Kalila, and a nice, small, gentle smoke to it. As this is a very, very new spirit, only been released, as Monica said, since 2013. At 5 years old, this is, you know, a rare opportunity to have some of the oldest spirit that will ever exist from the distillery. Again, Bunnahabhain tends to fill their casks at a very high ABV levels. This one, even after 5 years, retains 62.9%. So it's a fantastic candidate to age on further. In terms of you know, value performance as well, Stoische has been one of our top 5 performing casks in the cask investment market for value growth in the last 3-4 years, and it's showing no signs of slowing down. The demand for Islay is growing every single day, and to be able to have a little slice of this Islay history from its earliest production is a fantastic opportunity.
Compared with the ABV, you can keep like for 20 or 30 years. That's a fantastic cask for investment for sure. So we come to another Tullibardine cask. So that cask is distilled is like 21st of May in 2012. So cask type is ex-bourbon barrel. And the Tullibardine cask is from the Highland, which is another Scotch important region for this.
Yeah, so Tullibardin's an interesting distillery. It's got the distinction of being the very first distillery built after World War II, which was after a hiatus of about almost 50 years. In a very chilling prophecy, the famous distillery architect Charles Doig, who was responsible for building some of Speyside's most famous distillery silhouettes, said in the early 20th century that there would not be another distillery built for at least 50 years, was his prediction. Whether he had a crystal ball or he knew that there was going to be 2 world wars, we will never know, but he was accurate, because he was only about 2 years off with Tullibardine opening in the late 1940s. Very interesting distillery. The site actually has heritage in brewing that dates back to the 1500s. So there's always been a smell of roasting malt and delicious alcohol being produced there for a very, very long time. And the distillery is situated in the Southern Highlands near Perthshire. And it's a fantastic little distillery. a very small producer. It is today owned by the French company Picard Spirito et Vin. So it's got a lovely wine connection to it. And it's kept a very, very low profile. It's something that we don't see too often, either in bottle or cask. In terms of the style, I would describe it as very much a classic Highland towards Speyside flavor. It's rich, it's honeyed, it's toffee-ish, has a really smooth, sweet floral character to it. At 10 years old, for the price point, this would be a fantastic starter cask if you wanted to build a portfolio of casks to own. Again, with the others, the ABV is very high, so it's a fantastic candidate to age further. This is really just a beautiful jumping off point for cask ownership.
Perfect. So after this, we talk about the Ben Nevis, and which is very exciting nowadays, owned by another Japanese company, Banica. So as you know, we mentioned this year that Japan just released a new regulation about what is the Japanese whiskey. Before, as you know, I think a lot of Ben Nevis spirits just go for their Japanese whiskey, and now they cannot use it anymore. So that will be very interesting and valuable in the future, because as you know, the Japanese whiskey, the price are raising a lot, and I'm in charge of the China market. A lot of my clients, they really love the Ben Nevis cask and the Japanese whiskey. It's really nice and lovely straits.
Yeah, but Ben Nevis, as Monica said, Ben Nevis is a very interesting distillery. It has a heritage almost as old as Macallan, dating back to the 1820s. One that we really haven't seen a lot of in the last 30 years. For around about that period, the distillery has actually been owned by Japanese producer Nikka. And ironically, here in Scotland, we actually very, very rarely see Ben Nevis because around about almost 2/3 of the distillery's production actually was shipped over to Japan to be a part of the predominantly the Nikka black blend, and also things like Nikka straight from the barrel. Obviously, the regulations have recently changed in Japan, meaning that all whiskey bearing the title Japanese whiskey has to be 100% made, bottled, blended, distilled in Japan, the same as the rules are for Scotch. So that might well change. I mean, we'll hopefully see a little bit more from Ben Nevis. But in terms of its flavor profile, this is a fantastic, it's got a lovely vegetal, chewy, rich quality to it, very tobacco-y in character. If you've ever noticed the very rich sort of leafy quality, that vegetal flavor in Nikka straight from the barrel, that is 100% Ben Nevis that you're tasting in that bottling.
And we go for the last single malt cask, which is Bowmore. This is Bowmore cask from 1996. Wow, it's like almost 30 years old cask.
Yeah, so Bowmore obviously is one of Scotland's oldest distilleries, starting in 1779, and it is the oldest active distillery on the island of Islay. Like Bruichladdich, it's been in a position where the distillery really hasn't released casks, or only very seldom released casks to the independent market in the last 20 years. So we very, very, very seldom see Bowmore. Bowmore, along with Bunnahabhain, is often celebrated as being the lighter side of Islay. You've got that nice kind of sweet Szechuan pepper, spicy peat character to it, and a very nice light smoke. Something that's interesting to combine with the age on this cask at 26 years old is that it's been fully matured in a first fill ex-bourbon barrel. So this is the first time this cask has been used since bourbon, meaning that the wood is really replete with that vanilla sweetness. Combine that with 26 years of maturation, and you've got a fantastically sweet, rich, rounded, gentle Islay dram. A really fantastic opportunity, and something that would be very, very hard to repeat in the near future.
Yeah, and Bowmore just stopped selling any of them casks because every liquid, they're very precious about it. So after the Scotch single malt cask, we talk about maybe there's only one grain whiskey, and very well grain whiskey we put on the bid this time.
Yeah, so we've obviously, as Daniel mentioned, we've got the Hanyu House of Cards series in this option, and this one I would probably describe as a wild card. So Invergordon is what we call a single grain, which might be something new to a lot of you. Single grain, bit of a misnomer. It's actually made from an amalgam of different grains, usually things like barley, wheat, sometimes corn. Whereas single malt is 100% derived from barley. It's also distilled in a different way. It's distilled in what we call a column still rather than the traditional small onion-shaped pot still that single malt distilleries use. There's quite a lot of names for the still, patent still, coffee still, column still. I would love to, but I won't go into the heritage on all of these names. Do feel free to drop some questions, let me know more. Basically, it's a loop distillation method. It's very, very different. It was a more modern, if you like, style of distilling that became popular in the early to mid 19th century. Producing single grain at that time was a way of producing a liquid that was far more consistent than single malt was capable of being at that time. Fast forwarding to today, we only have 5 active grain distilleries in Scotland, and they're very, very large output. They produce a lot of spirit for famous gin brands like Gordon's and Hendrick's. But they also produce a lot of what we call, as we have in this cask, single grain, which is something that's normally added to blended whiskies to add body, sweetness, and character. Invergordon is a fantastic single grain distillery. It's the most northern in the country. It has a fantastic ownership heritage. It was at one time owned by the Hawker Siddeley company that made the famous World War II airplane, the Hurricane. And there actually used to be a single malt distillery on the site next door called the Ben Wyvis. And if you're a fan of Campbelltown whiskies, the Kilkerran single malt, the Glengyle distillery, actually uses the distilling equipment from Ben Wyvis. There's a nice connection there. In terms of what single grain is, because of the amalgam of grains, because of the loop distillation method, it's very similar in flavor profile to a bourbon. You get a really nice, rich honey, vanilla, toffee sweetness to it. Invergordon in particular is one of my favorites. It has a lovely, almost like syrupy pineapple, peach flavor to it, that real kind of stone fruit character. It's something very unusual. Single grain casks don't often turn up because they are so heavily used in blending. And at 32 years old, the flavor is just at a really perfect point. It's maturation. I've always really enjoyed more than the fruit in the tin, but the syrup from tin pineapples, something I've always enjoyed as a child. Invergordon at this age just reminds me 100% of that. It's so sweet and delicious, and just a satisfying dram for any occasion. So another great opportunity to own something truly unique in cask.
Yeah, I think it definitely the grain whiskey is like lower valuation now for this year. So if you can buy a grain whiskey in 32 years, so that will be a fantastic for the whiskey lover. So the rest of time I leave to Daniel because we have a couple of questions online now. So the first question is about how do you guarantee the sorry, let me stop sharing the screen first. Yeah. So the first question is, how do you guarantee the authenticity of the bottle sold, like Karizawa, this kind of the expensive bottle? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a big question because every category of the whiskey, I mean, since we started, I mean, you can come across many, oh, not many, I would say doji bottle, but every category, like, well, Karizawa was the prime Karizawa when they closed it down in 2004, 2005, and the whole remaining stock was sold to Merchant #1 drink, and then they subdivided to other distributor. And the early release back in 2008, 2007, all these cask strength release are very simple, without much anti-fraud awareness. But because the Karizawa bottle, like the Circle label or the Geisha series released from Taiwan, are pretty much standard. But the label could be reprint. We see that, and also like some of the Geisha series from the Taiwan release, the plastic capsule actually been replaced. We've seen that. But honestly, I don't come across many issues for Karizawa, but I do come across many issues for the Hanyu card series, especially those expensive ones. Like, for example, the color joker. I think in the market there's only 241 bottles, and I've come across many bad reproduction on just we make the mono label. Yeah, very bad fake. Other than that, we look at the Hanyu card series. We have to pay very much attention because not only the Hanyu Cask series using this type of standard stock bottle from the early release of Hanyu, but other similar Hanyu bottle also using this kind of stock bottle. So we make sure that we look at label correctly, the capsule color. They come from quite different. Sometimes it's purple, sometimes red, sometimes a muted black. So we are quite experienced on the Hanyu Cask. I am quite experienced with Hanyu Cask, so I'm pretty confident I'm okay with that. And we often advise customer when they buy a bottle of Hanyu Cask series to try to authenticate from them. But as what the question come, how do you quarantine? I can share with some experience with you. I mean, not for whiskey, but for wine. I mean, I saw a bottle of a very expensive, discontinuous wine, and I found out that 2 years later, this was absolutely not right. But I do have to admit that this is my mistake or my negligence. So I just go back to the seller and buyer. I will try out my best to authenticate, to try to make the proof from expert, and then get the money back from the seller and buyer. So that's what I'm trying to do. But other than that, Macallan, or the vintage Macallan from the 1940 to 1986, there are some dodgy issue. Even I've seen some reproduction of the carton box as well. And also the Macallan Fine Rare, well, when things getting expensive and valuable, reproduction happens. So I think it's all about the experience and also the archive, but I cannot guarantee, but I should try to avoid it in a very, very concise and very, very carefully. When we receive consignment, we'll ask for where's the bottle come from? Where do you get it from? I mean, can you tell me you bought it from a proper merchant or whiskey merchant or even a dealer? We know we're quite close in the circle, so we know who's the whiskey dealer in which country. So we know certain like a networking thing. So whiskey is a very small society. So I hope this can minimize the newcomer to avoid buying something which is not right to them. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, your answer. I think the most important is your experience, and we have a very special and professional team to help you to find the right bottles. So next question is, what are the last attempt on the use of different type of cask to finish like maturation process besides of classic bourbon, sherry, wine? What do you think about the tents in the future? I leave this question to Mark.
Yeah. So Mark, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I would say yes. Obviously, you know, sherry remains kind of king, and I would also sort of very quickly append that comment with the fact that you know, marketing and buzz is a big part of that. Macallan is obviously a brand that is leading that charge. They've obviously defined themselves for many, many years as being, you know, using sherry casks at the forefront of the maturation, although it is worth knowing that they do use a range of bourbon as well. It's not all first fill sherry across their range. I would say don't get too hung up on it. Yes, the trends, you know, to sort of answer the question directly, there are a lot more experimental casks coming out. Jim McEwen, we mentioned from Bruichladdich and Bowmore, he definitely led a charge. It set a bit of a precedent with Bruichladdich, you know, doing very unusual finishes in things like wine casks. If you ever tried the Octomore Orpheus, which was, you know, heavily peated spirit finished in wine, a fantastic and very unusual combination. And that has sort of, if you like, normalized the idea of using more unusual and adventurous casks. You know, for me personally, though, I would say keep an open mind. You know, I'm a bit of a geek and a snob when it comes to whiskey like that. I really enjoy trying things, you know, just ex-bourbon, refill bourbon, because it really gives a chance for the spirit to shine. It's not embellished by any kind of cask influence from sherry or wine or what have you. You know, I would say first and foremost, it comes down to your palate. You know, how do you enjoy your whiskey? What are the flavors that you enjoy? But I would say we also live in one of the best eras for whiskey. There's never been more experimentation. There's never been more single malt available and more unusual cask types. So we can confidently say that there really is a whiskey out there for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers. So the next question is like, how do you see the emergence of other whiskey for both Japan and Ireland impacting the dominance of the Scotch whiskey as investment in the future? So Daniel, I'd love to see what's your opinion about this question compared with Scotch whiskey.
I think the the global, not only whiskey, the global spirit market is coming in the new stage. I mean, when 10 or 15 years ago, we were talking about wine and cognacs will very much dominate for the more mature drinker. But after all this year, I've seen that, of course, the single malt whiskey for the past 15 years in Hong Kong is getting more and more strong and vibrant, same as the Japanese. And we've seen the past few 1 year, I would say the past 12 months, the bourbon has stood out quite strongly because of the American market. And Irish whiskey, I think with Cask, the Irish spirit, all these things, there's a strong demand for Europe and as for Irish whiskey in Hong Kong or in Asia. I think there's still room to grow, but we shouldn't underestimate its power, because I mean the spirit market for the entire generation, especially Generation Z, the younger generation, become a very popular drink and become more trendy. So I think it's all positive goal. I mean, I like gin. I'd like to drink a lot of gin, but the thing is, I cannot buy a lot of gin just by keeping it, because we want the freshness. But you can see some of the gin prices, some of the very like the gold series gins could be like £5,000 a bottle now. So it's all very common now. I think every category of handcrafted spirit should have a position in their market position. It should have a position in the market dominance. Yeah. So it depends on how we promote it. Yeah. Same as for rum. I mean, rum is a very strong market in South American and Central European country. And Hong Kong is just getting started in Asia. Yeah, it takes a bit time. I mean, we're still very much closed down, unfortunately, now in Hong Kong. Yeah, we still cannot travel like you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we can travel to Hong Kong soon, because I saw the news that when you travel in Hong Kong, you only need to do like 3 days quarantine hotel now. So
yeah, it's definitely much better now. You can travel and come back for 3-day quarantine, but there's still a little bit of hustle for business traveler. Because I mean, in Europe, in America, it's all everywhere except in Asia, in Hong Kong, yeah, and in China. Yeah.
perfect. So we still have some questions, but I think the time is already finished more or less. So if you have more questions, you can leave any question to us or sending out via email. I think today the webinar is quite successful. We answer a lot of questions, and if we have more questions about these auctions and the cask, no matter about cask or bottles, you can drop us a message. So thank you for Daniel, for Mark, every people who are attending this webinar. So see you next time. I'm waiting for your auction.
Thank you. Thank you all.